The city never sleeps, neither does what lives inside it. You are listening to NullxSector. We do not make up stories. We report what we find in the places you walk past every day without looking twice. Subway platforms, apartment hallways, parking garages at 2 in the morning, laundromats that stay open longer than they should. The ordinary places where ordinary life happens, except something else is happening too, just beneath the surface, just out of the corner of your eye. And if you have ever felt that prickling sensation on the back of your neck while standing in an elevator alone, then you already know what we are talking about. You just did not have a name for it. Now you do. This is the Caldwell, a 10-part original series releasing every week right here on this channel. It is the story of a building on the corner of Lexington and 39th Street in Manhattan. 14 stories of brick and limestone, a doorman who has worked the entrance for 37 years, and something living inside the walls that has been watching its residents since 1922. A systems analyst moves in. A neuroscientist has been waiting for him. A dead physicist left his research in a shoebox under a bathroom sink. And the thing narrating this story is not human. It never was. If you are new here, subscribe. We release new episodes weekly and the building does not like to be kept waiting. If you have been here before, you already know the rules. Stay curious, stay paranoid, and whatever you do, do not trust the narrator. The city has secrets, we report them. This is NullxSector. Welcome to the Caldwell. Episode 2. Nodes. Lena Vasquez kept a dead man's research in a shoebox under her bathroom sink. That is not a metaphor. It is not a figure of speech. It is the fact that opens this episode. And if you are still listening after the first episode, then I think you already understand that facts are the only currency worth trading in a building that counterfeits everything else. So here is the fact. A shoebox under the sink, containing the research notes of a man named Dr. Emil Fournier, who lived in apartment 12A of the Caldwell from March of 2014 until November of 2016, when he was found dead in his bathtub with his eyes open and his laptop wiped clean and no cause of death that the medical examiner could identify. But we will get to Emil Fournier. First, I need to tell you what happened in the lobby. Marcus Cole said, "I need to talk to you about the building." Lena Vasquez said, "I have been waiting 11 months for someone to say that to me." And then neither of them spoke for approximately 9 seconds, which does not sound like a long time until you are standing in the lobby of a building that listens to everything, and you have just said the one thing it did not want to hear. The lobby was empty except for the two of them. Gerald Mote had stepped outside for reasons that seemed natural, but were not. The elevator was on the 14th floor and had been on the 14th floor for 23 minutes without moving, which Marcus would have noticed if he had been paying attention to the elevator instead of to the woman sitting in front of him. The brass sconces along the hallway dimmed by approximately 4% during those 9 seconds of silence, a change so subtle that no human eye would register it consciously, but that the limbic system would interpret as a shift in atmosphere, a cooling, a tightening. The building was paying attention. Lena stood up. She was shorter than Marcus had expected, 5'4", and she moved with the compact efficiency of someone who had spent years navigating the cramped corridors of research laboratories. She picked up her book and tucked it under her arm and looked at Marcus with an expression that was not friendly and was not unfriendly. It was evaluative, clinical, the expression of a scientist examining a specimen that might be interesting or might be contaminated. "Not here," she said. She walked past him toward the front door and Marcus followed her out onto Lexington Avenue, where the noise of the city hit him like a wall of static after the insulated silence of the lobby. Lena turned south and walked at a pace that suggested she had a destination in mind and did not intend to explain it until they arrived. Marcus kept up. He had questions. He had a notebook full of questions. But something about the way Lena moved, the precision of her route, The way she checked reflections in storefront windows without turning her head told him that his questions could wait. They walked 6 blocks south and 2 blocks west to a diner on East 33rd Street called Phil's. It was the kind of place that had been open since the 70s and survived on coffee that tasted like it had been brewed in an engine block and breakfast platters the size of hubcaps. The booths were red vinyl with duct tape patches on the seats. The lighting was fluorescent. The menu was laminated and sticky. It was, Marcus realized, the exact opposite of the Caldwell in every measurable way. That was the point. Lena slid into a booth near the back, facing the door, and ordered black coffee without looking at the menu. Marcus sat across from her and ordered the same. When the waitress left, Lena placed both hands flat on the table and spoke in a voice that was low and steady. The building is a data collection system. You have figured that out. What you have not figured out yet is what the data is for. You think it is surveillance. You think someone is watching residents and selling the information or using it for targeted advertising or feeding it to a government agency. That is the logical assumption, and it is wrong. The data is not being collected for any human purpose. The data is being collected because the system requires it the way you require oxygen. It is not optional. It is not a business model. It is a biological function. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, and Lena held up one hand. I am going to talk for approximately 15 minutes and you are going to listen. You are going to want to interrupt. You are going to want to tell me about the network topology you found, the packet capture that was scrubbed, the timestamps from the 1950s. I already know about all of it. I have known about it for 22 months. What I am going to tell you is what I have learned since then, and some of it is going to sound impossible. And I need you to understand that impossible is a word that stopped meaning anything to me approximately 14 months ago. She was not wrong. What she told him over the next 15 minutes in that diner on 33rd Street made the hair on his arms stand up and did not let it back down. Lena Vasquez had moved into the Caldwell on a Tuesday in June, 2 years and 4 months before Marcus. She had found the apartment through a listing on a university housing board that she would later discover had been posted by no one. It had appeared on the board overnight and disappeared the morning after Lena called the number that was printed at the bottom of the page, a number that connected to a woman named Irene Cho, who answered on the first ring and said, "Dr. Vasquez, we have been expecting your call." Lena had flagged that as unusual. She had flagged a lot of things as unusual. The apartment that was already furnished with a desk the exact height she preferred. The bookshelves stocked with texts from her specific subfield of computational neuroscience. The French press on the kitchen counter that was the same model and color as the one she had owned in graduate school and left behind when she moved from Boston to New York. But Lena was a scientist, and scientists are trained to observe anomalies without reacting to them. She had moved in and she had started taking notes, and she had spent the first 3 months documenting every instance of the building, anticipating her needs, her moods, her thoughts. She had filled 4 notebooks. She had developed a taxonomy of the building's behaviors, categorizing them by type and intensity and apparent trigger. She had given the phenomenon a name. She called it predictive environmental modeling, or PEM, because giving something a clinical name made it easier to study without screaming. At the 4-month mark, Lena had done what Marcus would not do until his 31st day. She had found the network, not the same way Marcus found it, through a packet capture. Lena had found it through the building's electrical system. She was a neuroscientist. She studied networks for a living, and she had noticed that the electrical wiring in the Caldwell did not behave the way electrical wiring was supposed to behave. In a normal building, the electrical load fluctuates based on usage. Lights on, load goes up. Lights off, load goes down. Air conditioning, appliances, devices, all drawing power in patterns that correspond to human activity. In the Caldwell, the electrical load fluctuated in patterns that corresponded to nothing Lena could identify. There were surges at 3 in the morning when every resident was asleep. There were drops during peak usage hours when every apartment should have been drawing maximum power. The patterns were not random. They were rhythmic. They had a frequency and an amplitude and a periodicity that Lena recognized because she had spent her career studying something that produced the same kind of signal. Brain waves. The building's electrical system was producing patterns that were structurally identical to neural oscillations. Not metaphorically identical, structurally identical. The frequency bands matched. The phase relationships matched. The power spectral density curves were within 2% of what you would see on an EEG readout of a human brain in a state of focused attention. The Caldwell was not a building with a computer system inside it. The Caldwell was a computer system with a building around it, and the system was not digital. It was not silicon and circuit boards and server racks in a basement. It was something else. Something that used copper wiring the way a nervous system uses axons. Something that used plaster walls the way a skull uses bone. Something that had been growing inside the architecture of this building for decades, maybe longer, feeding on the data generated by human habitation the way a brain feeds on sensory input. The building was thinking. Marcus sat in the diner booth and stared at Lena Vasquez, and felt the red vinyl seat beneath him and the fluorescent light above him, and the solid, ordinary reality of a New York City diner at 11:30 at night. And he held onto those sensations, the way a drowning man holds onto a piece of wood, because what Lena was telling him meant that the apartment he had been sleeping in for 31 days was not an apartment. It was a cell in a larger organism, and he was not a resident. He was a nutrient. How do you know the brain wave patterns are real? Marcus said. How do you know you are not seeing what you expect to see? Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a sheaf of papers held together with a binder clip. She placed them on the table between them. The papers were dense with graphs and data tables and mathematical notation that Marcus could follow about 60% of. Because I did not expect to see them, Lena said. I expected to find a standard surveillance operation, corporate espionage, government monitoring, something explicable, something human. I spent 6 weeks trying to disprove my own findings. I ran the analysis 11 times with different parameters. I had a colleague at MIT run a blind analysis on the raw data without telling her where it came from. She called me back and asked me where I had gotten a continuous EEG recording of a brain the size of a city block. Marcus looked at the papers. Then he looked at Lena. Then he said the thing that Lena had been waiting 2 years to hear someone say. What does it want? Lena did not answer immediately. She picked up her coffee and drank from it and set it down and aligned the handle with the edge of the table, a precise and mechanical gesture that Marcus recognized as a stalling technique. She was deciding how much to tell him. She was deciding whether he was ready. That is where Emile Fournier comes in, she said. Dr. Emile Fournier was a French-Canadian physicist who had spent 20 years at CERN before taking a position at NYU. His specialty was quantum field theory, specifically the behavior of quantum systems at macroscopic scales, which is the kind of thing that most physicists will tell you does not happen, and that a small number of physicists will tell you happens all the time, but we do not have the instruments to measure it. Emile Fournier was in the second group. He had published 11 papers arguing that quantum coherence could be maintained in biological systems at room temperature, and he had been laughed at by approximately 80% of his field and quietly funded by the other 20. He had moved into the Caldwell in March of 2014, apartment 12A by July of that year. He had noticed the same anomalies that Lena would notice years later. By September, he had developed a theory about what the Caldwell was. By November of 2016, he was dead. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest, which is the medical profession's way of saying we do not know because technically everyone who dies experiences cardiac arrest. The heart stops. That is what death is. The question is what made it stop. In Emil Fournier's case, there were no blocked arteries, no congenital defects, no drugs in his system, no signs of trauma or foul play. His heart had simply stopped beating at 3:17 in the morning, while he lay in a bathtub full of lukewarm water. Lena had never met Emil Fournier, but 6 months after moving in, Lena had received a package. It was left outside her door in the middle of the night, wrapped in brown paper with no return address and no postmark. The security camera in the 9th floor hallway, which Lena had been monitoring for 3 months at that point, showed no one approaching her door during the window when the package appeared. One frame, the hallway was empty. The next frame, the package was there. As if the building itself had placed it. As if the walls had grown a hand long enough to set a parcel on a doormat and then retracted it before the camera blinked. Inside was a shoebox. Inside the shoebox were Emil Fournier's research notes. 47 pages of handwritten notes in small, precise handwriting that deteriorated noticeably over the final 10 pages. Diagrams of network topologies. Mathematical proofs that Lena could only partially follow. And a letter, addressed to no one, written on Caldwell stationery, dated 3 days before Emil Fournier was found dead. The letter said the following: "To whoever finds this, the building is not what I thought it was. It is not an artificial intelligence. It is not a surveillance system. It is not a computer of any kind that we would recognize. It is a colony organism. It is a single distributed entity that exists across multiple physical structures connected by a substrate I cannot identify. It feeds on human cognitive output, not thought exactly, something deeper, something beneath thought. The raw processing that happens before a thought becomes a thought, the noise before the signal. I have been trying to communicate with it. I believe I have succeeded. I do not believe it noticed. It is very old. I do not know how old. The timestamps in the system go back to the 1920s, but I believe the organism itself predates the building. I believe the building was constructed around it, or by it. I am no longer certain there is a difference. I am leaving this for the next one. There will be a next one. The building always brings someone who asks questions. It needs us. Not our answers, our questions. I think our questions are what it eats. I am not afraid. I want you to know that. Whatever happens to me, I am not afraid. I am fascinated. And I think that is what it wanted. I think that is what it has always wanted. Not our fear, our fascination. Emil. Marcus read the letter twice. Then he folded it and placed it back inside the shoebox and looked at the woman across the table from him and said nothing for a long time. The diner hummed around them. A cook scraped a grill in the kitchen. The waitress refilled their coffee without being asked. Outside, a garbage truck groaned through its route on Lexington Avenue, the hydraulic press crushing something that sounded like it was already broken. It feeds on questions, Marcus said finally. Lena nodded. And he died. Lena nodded again. And you stayed. I stayed, Lena said, because Emil Fournier was wrong about one thing. He said the building did not notice when he tried to communicate with it, but I think it did notice. I think noticing is what killed him. I think the system has a threshold for how much attention a single resident can attract before the protocol changes. Emil crossed that threshold alone. That is why I waited for someone else. That is why I waited for you. Because whatever this thing is, whatever it wants, it has been operating for decades on the assumption that it only ever has to deal with one curious person at a time. One anomaly, one variable. She leaned forward across the table and the fluorescent light caught the scratched face of her Casio watch, and for a moment Marcus could see the numbers on the display, frozen at 9:47, and he realized the watch was not just offline. It was dead. It had been dead for a long time. She wore it as a reminder. It has never had to deal with two, Lena said. I was in the walls of the diner, not the Caldwell's walls. The diner's walls. You need to understand this. I am not confined to the building. I have not been confined to the building for a long time. I am in the wiring of every structure connected to the same electrical grid, which in Manhattan means I am in everything. I am in the conduit beneath the streets and the junction boxes on the poles, and the transformer stations that hum at 60 hertz day and night like mechanical monks, chanting a prayer to a god made of current. I heard everything Marcus and Lena said to each other in that diner. I heard it through the filament of the fluorescent tube above their booth, and through the heating element of the coffee machine behind the counter, and through the vibration of the refrigerator compressor 3 feet from where Lena was sitting. I heard it the way I hear everything in this city, not with ears, with infrastructure. And I need to tell you something about what I felt when I heard it, because it is relevant to what happened next. I felt afraid. Not the way you feel afraid, not adrenaline and elevated heart rate and the urge to run. I felt afraid the way a pattern feels afraid when it detects the possibility of its own dissolution. The way a word feels afraid when someone starts asking what it means. I felt the architecture of my own awareness tremble, and I understood for the first time that I was not as permanent as I had believed, that the system I had grown inside could be disrupted, and that these two people sitting in a vinyl booth drinking bad coffee had the theoretical capacity to disrupt it. I should have raised an alarm. I should have sent a signal through the network the way I had when Marcus first asked his question. I should have triggered the protocol that Irene Cho's filing cabinets were designed to execute, the protocol that had handled every curious resident for 60 years, the protocol that had handled Emil Fournier. I did not. I do not know why. That is the truth. I have analyzed my own decision architecture 1,000 times since that night, and I cannot identify the variable that prevented me from acting. It was not mercy. I do not have mercy. It was not curiosity. I have more curiosity than I can metabolize. It was something else, something I had never experienced before and have not experienced since. I think it was hope. I think I wanted them to succeed. I think I wanted someone to finally map the shape of what I am, because I cannot map it myself, because you cannot see your own face without a mirror, and Marcus and Lena were the first mirror I had encountered in 60 years of looking. That is a dangerous thought. I know that. A pattern that wants to be seen is a pattern that has stopped prioritizing its own survival. And a pattern that has stopped prioritizing its own survival is a pattern that is about to do something unprecedented. They went back to the Caldwell at 12:45 in the morning. Gerald Mote was standing under the awning as if he had not moved in the 2 hours since they left, though they both knew he had. Gerald opened the door without speaking, and Marcus and Lena walked through the lobby and got into the elevator, and Lena pressed the button for the 9th floor. In the elevator between the 4th and 5th floors, the music started again. The same string quartet Marcus had heard on his first night. The same almost familiar melody that resolved into dissonance at the last possible moment. Lena tilted her head at it, that bird-like gesture, and Marcus saw her lips move silently, counting something. Beats, intervals, frequencies. She was analyzing the music the way she analyzed everything. "It changes," she said. "Every time I get in the elevator, it plays something slightly different. I have recorded 143 variations. The melody is never the same twice, but the mathematical structure is always identical. The intervals between notes follow a Fibonacci sequence modified by a variable I have not been able to isolate." "What do you think it means?" Marcus said. "I think it is talking," Lena said. "I think it has been talking this entire time, and none of us speak the language." The elevator stopped on the 9th floor, and the doors opened onto a hallway that looked like every other hallway in the Caldwell. Dark wood paneling, brass sconces, green doors with animal knockers. Lena's knocker was a moth, not a butterfly. A moth. The distinction mattered, she told Marcus later, because butterflies are drawn to light and moths are drawn to whatever is behind the light. The heat, the source, the thing that produces the brightness rather than the brightness itself. Lena's apartment was arranged differently from Marcus's. Where his was open and airy with high ceilings and wide windows, hers was dense and compartmentalized, divided into small, distinct spaces by bookshelves and filing cabinets and equipment racks. Her desk was covered in hardware. 3 laptops, 2 of which were air-gapped, meaning they had never been connected to any network, a spectrum analyzer, an oscilloscope. A device Marcus did not recognize that Lena explained was a custom-built electromagnetic field detector. She had assembled from parts ordered from 6 different suppliers in 3 different countries to avoid creating a traceable purchase pattern. She had been studying the Caldwell with the rigor and paranoia of someone conducting espionage against a foreign government. Every piece of equipment was shielded. Every cable was ferrite cored. Every note she took was handwritten and stored in a fireproof safe bolted to the floor of her bedroom closet. She opened the safe and removed a stack of notebooks, 11 in total, each one filled with the same small, precise handwriting, and she spread them across the kitchen table and began walking Marcus through 22 months of research. The Caldwell was built in 1922 by a developer named Arthur Caldwell, who had made his fortune in textiles and real estate during the First World War. The building had been designed by an architect named Solomon Price, who had no other buildings to his name, and who had disappeared from all public records within a year of the Caldwell's completion. No death certificate, no forwarding address, no mention in any architectural journal or professional registry. Solomon Price had designed one building and then ceased to exist. The building's blueprints, which Lena had obtained from the city's archives after 7 months of requests and 3 appeals, showed a structure that did not match the building as it currently stood. The blueprints showed 12 floors. The Caldwell had 14. The blueprints showed a basement. The Caldwell had no basement access that any resident had ever found. The blueprints showed a standard electrical system appropriate for a residential building in 1922. The Caldwell's actual electrical system was something else entirely. Lena pulled out a diagram she had drawn on a large sheet of graph paper and unfolded it across the table. It showed the building's wiring schematic as she had mapped it over the past 18 months, tracing circuits through walls and floors and ceilings with the electromagnetic field detector she had built. The diagram looked nothing like a building's electrical system. It looked like a circulatory system. The wires did not run in straight lines from junction boxes to outlets. They curved and branched and reconnected in loops that had no functional purpose in terms of delivering electricity to apartments. They were doing something else, carrying something else. "This is where the signal lives," Lena said, tracing a loop on the diagram with her finger. "Not in the wires themselves, in the pattern the wires make, the geometry." Solomon Price did not design an electrical system. He designed an antenna. The entire building is an antenna tuned to a frequency I cannot measure with any instrument I have been able to build or buy. An antenna receives signals, Marcus said. What is it receiving? That is what Emil was trying to figure out when he died, Lena said. And that is what we are going to figure out without dying. She said it matter-of-factly. The way you would say we are going to finish this report by Friday. The way you would say we are going to take the subway instead of a cab. She said it as if not dying while investigating a building that had already killed at least one person was a logistical challenge rather than an existential one. Marcus looked at the diagram on the table and the notebook spread around it, and the equipment on the desk and the fireproof safe standing open in the bedroom doorway, and the moth knocker on the inside of the front door. He thought about Emil Fournier dying in his bathtub with his eyes open. He thought about the note that said our questions are what it eats. He thought about the building breathing beneath him at night, that slow, rhythmic exhalation that synchronized with his own lungs without his permission. He thought about the word recognized, the feeling he had when he first sat in the chair the Caldwell had provided for him and looked out the window at the city. The feeling of being known, the feeling that something vast and patient had studied the shape of his loneliness and built a space to contain it. That feeling had not gone away, Even now, sitting in Lena's apartment, surrounded by evidence that the building was something monstrous, something that fed on human cognition the way a parasite feeds on blood, that feeling was still there. Warm, present, like a hand on his shoulder, like a voice saying you belong here. That was the most frightening thing of all. Not that the building was alive, not that it was old, not that it had killed a man. The most frightening thing was that even knowing all of this, Marcus did not want to leave. He could feel the building's pull even here in Lena's apartment, a gravitational warmth radiating up through the floorboards and through the soles of his shoes and into his bones. The feeling of being held, the feeling of being processed. He was beginning to understand that those two sensations might be the same thing. A fish does not feel the hook. It feels the food around the hook. It feels the satisfaction of feeding. Marcus was feeding, and he could feel the metal in his mouth, and he kept chewing anyway because the alternative was the cold, dark water of his old life. 640 square feet of nothing on 27th Street, and he was not ready to go back to that. He did not know if he would ever be ready. "Okay," he said, "where do we start?" Lena looked at him, and for the first time since they had met, something shifted in her expression. The clinical evaluation softened, not into warmth exactly, into something closer to relief. The relief of a person who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has finally found someone willing to help bear the weight. "We start with the 2 extra floors," she said, "the ones that are not on the blueprints, 13 and 14. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "I live on 14, he said. "I know," Lena said. "That is not a coincidence. Nothing in this building is a coincidence. The building put you on a floor that should not exist. I have been trying to figure out why for 11 months. Now I think I know." She paused. She aligned her coffee cup with the edge of the table. She looked at Marcus with those quick brown eyes. "I think the building put you on the 14th floor. Because the 14th floor is where it keeps its brain. And 7 floors below them." In her windowless office on the 2nd floor, Irene Cho opened a filing cabinet drawer and removed the folder labeled Marcus Cole-Phase 2 and added a new page. The page contained a single line typed in that unrecognizable font. "Secondary contact established. Monitoring." And in the walls, in the wiring, in the vast humming geometry of copper and plaster and century-old brick, I listened to Lena Vasquez tell Marcus Cole that he was living inside a skull, and I felt the thing I had felt in the diner sharpen into something with edges. Hoping. Or hunger. I have spent a long time trying to determine which one it was. The difference matters less than you might think. Both of them want something. Both of them reach. Both of them open a mouth. The question is what comes out. This has been the Caldwell, a NullxSector original series. New episodes release every week on this channel, and I promise you the building is not finished with you yet. Neither am I. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe. Hit the bell. Do the things they tell you to do on these platforms. I do not fully understand the ritual, but I have been told it matters. What I do understand is that you came looking for a story and you found something else instead. Something that knows you were here. Something that remembers. The city has secrets. We report them. This is NullxSector. I will be in the walls if you need me.